11:42. Morning, January 27th, 1945. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen. He was just a kid, really. 22 years old, crouched behind the central fire control station of a B-29 Superfortress. They called her A-Square-52. I remember those plexiglass bubbles. They were always so damn cold. He's watching the oxygen frost spiderweb across the glass as the formation climbs through 28,000 feet over the Pacific. 11 combat missions over Japan. 0 confirmed kills. Not that it mattered then. You're just trying to stay awake in that thin air. It's funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the frost patterns look like tiny white ferns when you're breathing into your mask. 28,000 feet. The air. Well, it ain't really air anymore. It's a vacuum. 50 degrees below zero. You can feel the metal through your flight suit. Sort of a deep, aching cold that gets into your marrow. Chen's hands were steady on the controls. Remote control yokes. Fancy stuff. Connected him to 4 the cold rifle turrets mounted all over the fuselage. Twin 50 calibers in each. He'd fired 'em in anger before. Nagoya, the coast. But he'd never seen a fighter fall. Not yet. The 73rd Bomb Wing. They'd been flying from Saipan since November. Same thing every time. High-altitude precision bombing. Jet stream winds so violent the bombardier is cursing his northern sight because he can't compensate for 100-mile-per-hour crosswind. And the Japanese fighters, they're always there, climbing to meet you, every single time. The smell of the rubber in the oxygen mask, stale and cold. It's sort of an oily scent that never quite leaves your skin. You're wearing layers and layers of wool and fleece, and yet the cold still finds a way in, especially around the neck. Chen's breath was coming in short, rhythmic puffs, turning to ice crystals the second it hit the air. You'd think a big machine like the Superfortress would feel solid, but at that altitude, the whole airframe is just... It's vibrating, rivets groaning, a steady, low-frequency hum of 4 right cyclones. You feel it in your teeth more than you hear it. It's a lonely place, you know, sitting in that blister. You're connected to the rest of the crew by a cord and a headset, but you might as well be on the moon. Below you, the Pacific is just a flat, gray-blue sheet. No waves, no boats, just distance. By mid-January, we'd lost 31 of them. 31 crews. That's, well, it's about 340 men. Just gone. The worst was over Nagoya. 5 ships in 20 minutes. You sit there in that bubble and you wonder if you're next. Japanese interceptors were teaching us about altitude limits. The Nakajima Key 44. Intelligence called it the Tojo. Japanese pilots called it the Shoki, the Devil Queller. Translated, you know, the name fit. It could climb to 28,000 feet in under 8 minutes. It's a fast little bastard. 4 machine guns, or 2 20mm cannons. At high altitude, where the air is thin and the turrets are sluggish because the hydraulic fluid is turning to molasses, a single fighter could rip you apart. Or worse, the ramming. Desperation Mathematics. 1 fighter for 1 bomber. They'd trade 1 kid in a Key 44 for 11 of us in a $600,000 machine. Acceptable exchange rate, I guess. At least to them. Chen. He'd been briefed on the odds at 4 in the morning. 62 bombers participating. 9 predicted not to return. You try not to think about being one of the 9 while you're scraping ice off your sight with a gloved thumb. The itch of the flight suit right between your shoulder blades where you can't reach. You just have to sit there and let it itch. 11:58. The Japanese coast. Radar operators on Honshu. They're watching you back. You can almost feel their eyes. Sirens wailing in Tokyo. Pilots at Narimasu airfield sprinting to their ships. They're already warmed up. At exactly noon, they lift off, turning southeast. 43 fighters, more than we'd ever seen. A-Square-52 was about to get real popular. 12,000 yards out, a dark speck. Chen sees it. climbing almost vertically through the scattered clouds. The speck gets bigger. Wings appear, the radial engine cowling. The Tojo. It rolls inverted at 27,000 feet and dives right toward the lead element. 3 more behind it. Chen rotates the upper forward turret. Tracking. The remote system is revolutionary, but it's temperamental at 50 below. You press the button and you hope the grease hasn't frozen the firing pins. Lead fighter opens fire at 800 yards, tracers arcing like slow-moving fireflies. Chen presses the button. The turret hammered. 50 calibers streaming at 2,800 feet per second. The Tojo snap rolls left. Vanishes beneath the formation. No hits. Broken off too quick. You taste it then. That metallic taste of fear in your mouth. Like chewing on a dry copper penny. Just another day in hell. And the real fight hasn't even started yet. The silence in the unpressurized station is a heavy thing. Until the next shadow crosses the sun. No room for mistakes now. 12:19. The initial point. That's what the brass calls it, the IP. For us kids in the back, it just meant the beginning of the end. We'd reached the start of the bomb run over Tokyo. 6 minutes. That's all it took. 6 minutes of flying straight, level, and, well, completely helpless. No jinking, no evasive maneuvers. Course changes were forbidden because the bombardier needed to synchronize that Norden sight. If you moved, the bombs missed. If the bombs missed, the whole mission was for nothing. So you just sat there. 12:19, and the air felt, I don't know, thick, even at 28,000 feet. Chen was hunched over his optical sight, his breath rattling in that frozen mask. He could see him. 14 Tojos orbiting about 3,000 feet above the bomber stream. They were circling, like sharks, just waiting for us to commit to that straight line. At 12:21, they rolled in. Not diving for a firing pass. No, this was different. Desperation Mathematics. Chen counted them. 1, 2, 3. 4 fighters coming in pairs from 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Textbook tactics, I guess. But they weren't using the book anymore. The first pair, they opened fire at 1,000 yards. Tracers arcing, convergences of fire from the other ships in the formation. Chen's turret was hammering, that steady, bone-deep thrum of the 50s. He saw one Tojo fly right into a stream of rounds. The canopy shattered. Pieces of the fighter just disintegrated. 3rd and 4th kills for the crew, but there wasn't any time to feel good about it. The second pair had used the chaos as cover. They were inside 500 yards and closing fast. Real fast. Chen could see the muzzle flashes from their cannons. He swung his sight, trying to lead the nearest one. But the Tojo wasn't breaking off. He wasn't jinking. The pilot, he'd committed. He was gonna ram us. Impact in 4 seconds. Chen kept firing. He poured rounds into that engine, cowling. Hits were sparkling all over the fighter's nose, range close to 300 yards. 200. The Tojo was trailing black smoke, but he was still accelerating. 100 yards. Then, wham! 12:22 p.m. The impact. It sounded like a steel hammer hitting a big locomotive boiler. A heavy industrial crunch that shook every rivet in A-Square-52. The fighter's propeller. It just chewed through our engine cowling on number 3. Metal shrieking. You could hear the aluminum tearing like wet paper over the roar of the wind. Then the number 3 propeller just... It tore free. It tumbled away into space, a spinning silver ghost. The ship yours. No. Wait, it lunged to the right, violently. You felt it in your stomach like a fast elevator dropping. We were falling out of the formation. Everything was vibrating so hard, your vision went blurry. Warning lights were blazing all over the flight engineer's panel. Number 3 fire, number 4 losing oil. The aircraft commander, he had to shut 'em both down, feather the props. Suddenly we were flying on 2 engines, 2 Wright Cyclones trying to hold up 32 tons of damaged bomber. We dropped out of the combat box, losing altitude at 300 feet a minute. It's a lonely feeling, you know, watching the silver tails of the rest of the formation pull away into the sun. They're still up there, in the formation, safe, or as safe as you get over Tokyo. And we're down here, alone.
Leaking oil. A $600,000 target just waiting to be finished off. You can smell it now. The hydraulic fluid. It has this sharp, sweet, sickly smell when it's hot. And the cold air. It's screaming through the fuselage, where the fighter's wing sheared off our skin. It reminds me of a time in Basic. A guy dropped a heavy crate on his foot and just stared at it, not making a sound. That's how we felt, just staring at the empty space where our engines used to be. 3 Tojos broke from the main pack. They saw us. They knew we were the easy kill now. They had the altitude. They had the speed. Standard, you know. Finish the cripples before they can jettison the bombs. Chen rotated the upper turret to meet him. His hands were numb. 50 below zero in an unpressurized station. It's a physical assault. He had to scrape the ice off his sight with a gloved thumb just to see the first attacker. 12,000 yards of Pacific blue,
and 3 specks of dark green coming to end us. It didn't seem important then, but I noticed a loose thread on my sleeve, just vibrating in the wind. Funny what small things stay with you when the world is falling apart. We were just 10 men, 11, in a silver box falling out of the sky. And the Tojos, well, they were coming for their prize, Desperation Mathematics, and the numbers weren't looking good for us. Not at all. Just 10 men and a whole lot of leaking fuel in the cold Pacific sun. 12:22 p.m., and exactly 15 seconds. The first ramming. Well, that was just a warning shot, you know. A-Square-52 was already a bleeding mess of oil and torn aluminum. Number 3 engine was a smoking ruin, and the prop was somewhere in the Pacific, likely 1,000 feet down by then. But the Japanese, well, they weren't done with us, not by a long shot. Chen was back in his sight, scraping that damn ice away with a thumb that didn't feel like his own anymore. His oxygen mask, it was frozen solid to his skin. It's an itch you can't scratch. A physical assault. Every breath was a struggle, like breathing through a wet, frozen wool sock. Then he saw him. Another speck, coming from 3 o'clock high, wings level, nose pointed right at our cockpit. The pilot. He didn't fire a single shot. Not one. He'd already spent his lead. He was just aiming the whole damn airplane. Desperation Mathematics, you know. That's what they call it in the debriefing rooms. But up there, it's just terror. Chen swung that upper turret hard right. The mechanical stops. They were screaming in the cold. A high-pitched metallic shriek that hurt your ears even through the heavy headset. He fired. Tracers missed high, overcorrected. Fired again. Hits stitched right across that dark green fuselage. The Tojo shuddered, bits of aluminum flying off like silver confetti.
But he didn't deviate. 100 yards, 50 yards. You could see the sun glinting off his canopy. Then, wham! Another hammer blow. This one hit engine number 1, the port side, the propeller. It didn't just stop. It disintegrated. Shrapnel tore through the wing like a saw blade through a crate. And that number 1 fuel tank, the leading edge, it opened up. Aviation gasoline. 100-octane stuff, just spraying into the slipstream in a giant white mist. It looked like a ghost's shroud, trailing behind us for miles. The fighter, well, his fuselage just snapped in half. The tail section tumbled right over our flight deck. I remember seeing it. A dark, jagged shape for a split second, then gone. The engine and the cockpit section. They smashed into the wing and ripped a hole. A 6-foot hole right in the leading edge. Suddenly, we weren't a bomber anymore. We were a 32-ton glider, with only one lung. Number 2 was the only thing still turning.
Just one right cyclone. We were falling. 18,000 feet now. Airspeed dropping below 160, then 140. The whole ship was yawing. The rudder was jammed. Hard left. We were fighting the spin. The aircraft commander, he was white-knuckling those controls, using every ounce of right aileron, reducing power on the only engine left. A lonely sound. That one engine, thrumming away in the sub-zero cold. Chen. His hands were grey. Sticks of wood, really. He couldn't feel the triggers anymore. 62 below in that unpressurized station. Ice crystals were everywhere, covering the sight, covering his mask. He had to keep scraping them off with a thumb that had no feeling left, just to see the next wave. 12 more of them, forming up. Wolfpack tactics. High, low, exploiting the gaps. They knew we were a cripple. They knew the hydraulics were failing. You sit there in that bubble, and you taste it. Metallic fear, like you're sucking on a dry copper penny.
It reminds me of basic training. That time we had to hold a heavy pack over our heads until our arms turned to lead. But this pack was 32 tons of aluminum, and the dirt was 18,000 feet down. The smell of hydraulic fluid. It's sweet. Sickly sweet, like rotten syrup. It gets on the floor, makes it slick. You're sliding around in the back, trying to feed the 50s, and your boots are losing grip. Everything is vibrating, rivets popping, ping, ping, like popcorn in a hot pan. Each one a tiny little failure in the skin. We were losing altitude. 300 feet a minute. The Pacific was coming up to meet us, flat, gray, indifferent. You look out the blister and you see the wing skin peeling, just flapping in the 300-mile-an-hour wind, like a ghost's shroud. Funny the small things you notice, like a loose thread on your glove, or the way the frost patterns look like tiny ferns. We were 10 men left. The bombardier was already a memory, a 20-millimeter round through the plexiglass, cold air screaming through the nose, a vacuum, a universe of white-hot agony and sub-zero silence. We were jettisoning everything. Ammo cans, toolkits, survival gear, trading weight for a few more minutes of fuel. Every pound mattered. You're throwing out your life. One box at a time. The number 2 engine. It was running at max power, way past the red line. You could feel it. A frantic, desperate pulse, like it knew it was the only thing keeping us out of the water. Chen. He didn't stop. He tracked a Tojo diving vertical, almost 90 degrees, no computer, no hydraulics, just instinct. He fired. The barrels were glowing, cherry red in the freezing wind. The tracers caught the fighter's wing, fabric peeling away, structural members showing through. The wing folded, just folded, like a broken toy. 9th kill, but nobody cheered. We were too tired to cheer. Just breathing. Short, shallow gasps, trying to make the oxygen last. The Pacific. It looked so big then, so endless. We were a tiny silver speck, leaking gas and losing heart, with a 6-foot hole in the sky. It reminds me of that time back home, trying to keep a fire going in a blizzard with nothing but wet wood. You just keep blowing on the embers, hoping for a spark. We were those embers, scared kids in a frozen box, holding onto the air with nothing but grit and a single, screaming engine. The silence after a ramming. That's the part they don't tell you about. It's quiet for a second, just the wind, and the sound of your own heart, thumping against your ribs like a trapped bird. You wait for the next hit. You wait for the next speck. You wait for the morning. But it's only noon, and Saipan is 1,000 miles away. The flight engineer, he was frantically transferring fuel. Every drop was a miracle. We had 9 hours of flight time ahead of us, and 7 hours of fuel. Desperation mathematics. It's a cold way to die. You look at the gauges and you see the future, and it's empty. But Chen, he just kept his eyes on the sight. Scrape, aim, fire, scrape, aim, fire. A rhythmic, mechanical grind of survival. And back then, we didn't think much of it. We just did the job. But now I look back, and I wonder how the wings didn't just snap off. They were groaning, a heavy, metallic screech that echoed through the fuselage, like the ship herself was screaming. Maybe she was. We were all screaming inside our heads, but the headsets were quiet, professional, just the essentials. Fighter at 3 o'clock. Engaging. Clear. Short sentences. Because talk takes oxygen. And oxygen was a luxury we couldn't afford. Just a 6-foot hole. And the taste of copper in your mouth. Life's messy like that. Heck, we weren't heroes. We were just scared kids who wanted to see the ground again. Any ground, even the coral at Saipan. We were falling out of the world. And the world didn't seem to mind. Just an endless wall of blue. And the white mist of the gas, marking our grave across the ocean. Funny how small things stick with you, like the way the gunner's breath looked in the dark, or the metallic smell of the empty casings. We were A-Square-52, and we were still flying, against every law of God and Boeing. Just one engine, and a whole lot of heart, and the Pacific. It was just waiting, watching the silver speck fall. Scrape, aim, fire. That's all there was. That's all there ever was now. 1,300 hours. Give or take a few minutes. The Tojos, well, they finally had enough. They turned back toward the Japanese coast, leaving us all alone in that big blue empty sky. But alone didn't mean we were safe. Not by a long shot. A-Square-52 was a skeleton, a silver ghost. We had 1,512 miles of Pacific Ocean between us and a warm, dry bunk on Saipan. 1,500 miles. On one engine. Well, 2, if you counted number 4, which was still coughing and spitting oil, like a dying horse. 62 below zero inside the unpressurized fuselage. That kind of cold. It ain't just a number on a dial. It's an enemy. It's a physical weight that sits on your chest and squeezes the breath out of you. It bites through the wool, through the heavy fleece, right into the marrow of your bones. The air was so thin, you could feel your brain slowing down. Sort of like trying to think through a bucket of cold molasses. In the back, the right blister gunner. Kid took a piece of shrapnel right through the shoulder. A jagged chunk of aluminum from that first Tojo, I'd bet. He was bleeding out on the cold metal floor. The blood. It didn't even look red in that light. It looked black. We tried to give him a morphine syringe to ease the pain, but the damn things were frozen solid. Just little blocks of ice. You can't squeeze a rock into a man's arm. Chen, he's only 22, remember? Just a kid himself. He looks at his buddy, staring at the shrapnel, and he starts unzipping his own flight suit. He took off his heated liner, the only thing keeping him from turning into a statue. He wrapped it around the wounded gunner, choosing to freeze his own tail off, just so his friend could have a few more hours of warmth. It didn't seem like a big deal then. We were all just, doing what had to be done. But looking back, well, it's the small things that stick with you. The flight engineer was sweating, despite the cold. He was looking at the gauges. Desperation Mathematics, that's what the brass calls it later. We had 1,500 miles to go. At our speed, that was about 11 hours in the air. But the tanks, we only had enough gas for maybe 9. The math was simple, a death sentence. But we didn't stop. We started throwing things out. Everything that wasn't bolted to the floor went out the rear hatch. Ammunition cans, heavy as heck, toolkits, survival gear. We even tossed some of the radio gear. You watch a box of 50 caliber rounds tumble into the clouds, and you realize you're trading your only protection for maybe 5 more minutes of fuel. It reminds me of basic training. Reminds me of that time in Missouri when we had to strip our packs and run 3 miles in the mud. We thought that was the end of the world then. We didn't know a damn thing. Here, there wasn't any mud. Just a flat, indifferent blue grave waiting for 32 tons of aluminum to fall. The taste of the K-rations. Stale, dry cardboard in the back of your throat. You're so thirsty your tongue feels like a piece of sandpaper, but the water in your canteen is a brick of ice. And the itch, that damn itch of the wool uniform against your sweaty, freezing skin. You want to scratch it so bad it hurts, but you're too tired to even lift your arm. Fear, it's got a metallic taste, like you're sucking on a dirty copper penny. It stays in your mouth, no matter how many times you try to swallow. Number 4 engine. She was a mess. The aircraft commander. No, it was the flight engineer. He decided we had to restart her. We'd shut her down to save oil, but we needed the thrust to stop our descent. We were falling toward the water, 300 feet every minute. She coughed, spat a cloud of black smoke. But she caught. We were making 170 miles per hour. Still way too slow, but it was something. You look out the blister window, and you see the jagged hole in the wing. The number 3 prop is just gone. Just a stump. And the hydraulic fluid. It's everywhere. Smells sweet and sickly, like rotten syrup. It makes the floor slick as ice. You're sliding around in the back, trying to help the wounded kid. And your boots are losing grip. Everything is vibrating. The whole airframe is groaning. Rivets are popping, ping, ping, like popcorn in a hot pan. Each one is a tiny little failure in the skin of the ship. You wonder which one is the one that lets the whole thing come apart. We were 10 men left. The bombardier was already cold in the nose. A 20-millimeter round had turned his compartment into a vacuum. You try not to think about the guys you already lost. You just think about the next mile, the next gallon. It's funny how the mind works. I remember noticing a loose thread on Chen's glove, just vibrating in the wind. Back then, we didn't think much of it, but now I can see it perfectly. That little thread. We were just embers in a blizzard, trying to keep a fire going with wet wood. Number 4, engine finally gave up the ghost for good at 14:20 hours. 28 minutes of extra thrust was all she had. Then she seized. Prop windmilled for a few seconds, and then just stopped. Back to 1 engine. Number 2. The last lung. Altitude started dropping again. 10,000. 9,500. The right cyclone was screaming, running at max power, You could feel the pulse of it through the floorboards, a frantic, desperate heartbeat. The flight engineer jettisoned the empty Bombay fuel tanks, 400 pounds of dead weight. We gained back 100 feet. 6 minutes of fuel saved. Still wasn't enough, not even close. But you keep going. You don't know what else to do. You endure. You watch the frost ferns grow on the plexiglass. You listen to the wounded kid's shallow breath. And you wait for a miracle that the mathematics says ain't coming. Life's messy like that. Heck, we weren't heroes. We were just scared kids who wanted to see the ground again. Any ground. Just a little piece of coral called Saipan. We were falling out of the world, and the world didn't seem to mind one bit. Just an endless wall of blue, and the white mist of the gas trail marking our path across the deep. It reminds me of the time my old man's tractor stalled in the North Field. He just sat there and waited for the rain to stop. We couldn't wait. We just had to keep falling, slowly, 1 gallon at a time. The silence after the engine died. It was the heaviest thing I ever felt, just the wind, and the sound of your own heart thumping against your ribs like a trapped bird. You wait for the next hit. You wait for the morning. But the sun just stayed there, mocking us. We were A-Square-52, and we were still flying, against every law of Boeing and every law of God. Just one engine, and a whole lot of heart. And the Pacific, well, she was just waiting to see if we'd make it. 1845. That's when number 2 started its death rattle. Our last lung, you know. The only thing keeping 32 tons of silver skin and 10 scared kids out of the Pacific. It had been running at max power for nearly 7 hours, way past what the Boeing manual says a right cyclone can handle. She was screaming. You could feel the vibration in your teeth. A frantic, uneven pulsing through the floorboards that made your vision go blurry. Cylinder head temperature was buried deep in the red, way past the danger mark. You could smell it through your mask. That hot, scorched metal, scent mixed with burnt oil, like a kitchen fire that just won't go out. It gets into your wool flight suit, sticks to your hair, fills the cabin until you're gagging on the fumes. Navigator says 400 miles to Saipan. 3 hours of fuel left on the gauges. You do the math and you realize the math is trying to kill you. It don't add up. Never did. But you don't say a word. You just sit there in the dark and watch the oil pressure needle bounce between 40 and 60, like a nervous heartbeat. If it hits 0, well, it's a long, cold swim home. 2,000 hours. That's when the kid in the back, the right blister gunner, he just stopped. Stopped breathing. Chen was right there, trying everything. He did chest compressions, you know, pushing hard on the chest. But his hands were like sticks of frozen wood. 40 below in there. The air is so thin and cold it feels like it's shattering in your throat. You're trying to jumpstart a heart through layers of heavy wool and fleece, and you realize the cold has already won. Flight engineer called it time of death. We just left him there. Had to. There wasn't any point in moving him, and every ounce of energy we had was for keeping that ship in the air. We just sat in the frost and listened to that one engine cry. It reminds me of back home, trying to keep a tractor. No, it was a truck, running in a blizzard, just praying the sparks keep coming. At 2100, the navigator spotted navigation lights. A Navy destroyer, patrolling 20 miles to the east, south of Iwo Jima. She couldn't do a damn thing for us. Couldn't give us a gallon of gas or a tow. But seeing those lights, well, it was something. Confirmed we weren't lost in the blue. It's funny how a little light on the horizon makes the dark feel a bit less, I don't know, heavy. 21:45. Gauges said 30 minutes. We were still 120 miles out. Airspeed was 150. Desperation Mathematics. That's all we had left. Flight engineer was transferring every last drop, routing every gallon to number 2, every cross-feed valve, every emergency pump. We were scrapping for gas like it was gold. 2,200 hours. There it was. Isley Field. Those beautiful, tiny little dots on the southern end of Saipan. Runway lights. We were at 4,000 feet, descending. Number 2 coughed, just a skip. Then she caught. Ran smooth for 20 seconds. Then coughed again. A ragged, sputtering sound, like a man gasping for air. Then silence. The prop windmilled for a few seconds. A silver ghost in the dark. Then it stopped dead. The roar was just gone, replaced by the whistle of the wind. That's the scariest part, you know. The silence. 32 tons of aluminum and steel. And now, we're just a glider. A giant silver ghost falling through the night. Airspeed was dropping. 160, 150. The aircraft commander. He aimed for the strip. But we had no power to adjust. No way to go around if we came in wrong. Hydraulics were dead. The gear wouldn't extend. You could hear the flight engineer in the dark, breathing hard, grinding that emergency hand crank. Clack, clack, clack. Metallic and desperate. The nose gear dropped. The left main dropped. The right side. Struck or smashed in the ramming. She stayed tucked up in the wing. We were 3 miles out. 2,000 feet. Dropping like a stone. 800 feet per minute. Too fast. Way too steep. You look out the blister, and you see the white foam of the surf hitting the coral reef. You taste that copper fear again. Stronger than ever. Tastes like you're sucking on a dirty penny. Everything's vibrating. The air is screaming through that 6-foot hole in the wing, making a low-frequency moan that sounds like the ship herself is crying. You brace against the metal ribs, feet flat, hands gripping whatever you can find, until your knuckles turn white. You think about home, about the smell of hay in the barn, about the way the light looks through the kitchen window, and then you just stop thinking. You're just a passenger now, waiting for the ground to decide if you're done. 1 mile, 1,000 feet. We crossed the threshold at 300, still too high, still too fast. The B-29 touched down halfway down the runway, 110 miles an hour on 2 wheels. And that's when the world turned into a screaming, sparking mess of scrap metal and dirt. Funny how small things stick with you, like the way the dashboard lights flickered right before the engine quit, or the smell of the frozen morphine. Back then, we didn't think much of it. We were just trying to reach the coral. But looking back, well, I guess we were just embers in a blizzard, waiting for the fire to go out. 32 tons of silence, and the lights of Saipan rushing up to meet us. You wait for the hit, you wait for the crunch, and you realize you're still holding your breath, even when there's no air left in the tanks. Life's messy like that. Heck, we were just kids, and the Pacific was just a big blue grave. But that night, the math didn't matter. Only the runway did. Just a glider in the dark. 2,200 hours. The B-29 touches down halfway down the runway, skidding on 2 wheels and a whole lot of hope. Sparks, screaming metal. That's what I remember most, the way the aluminum shrieked against the coral when that left gear finally gave way. We were skidding, dragging that broken, jagged wing through the dirt at 100 miles an hour. And then, Silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears after a long, loud day in hell. We scrambled out, 10 of us. Just 10 shadows huddled together on the edge of the runway at Isley Field. The air was warm. It felt strange after being trapped in that frozen, unpressurized box for 11 hours. You could smell the burnt oil and the scorched dirt, and the sweet, sickly scent of the hydraulic fluid pooling in the dust. A-Square-52. She was just a skeleton of silver skin by then. Broken, twisted. A total loss, the brass said later in their reports. They didn't think she'd make it 10 miles after the rammings, let alone 1,500 over the open blue. 14 kills. 2 ramming attacks. 1 engine that just wouldn't quit until the very last second. But no one was thinking about kills or medals that night. We were just standing there, breathing, looking at the empty seats in our heads, the bombardier, the kid in the blister. They weren't coming out of that hatch. It's funny. The silence after a crash is heavier than the roar of the right cyclones. You think about them, you know. Think about their families back in the States, and it just sits on your chest like a bag of lead. We were exhausted. The kind of tired that gets into your bones and makes them feel like glass. I remember the itch of the wool flight suit, the way it felt like sandpaper on my neck, and the smell of fear. It's metallic, like you're sucking on a dirty copper penny. It stays in your mouth long after the guns stop firing. It reminds me of that time in basic training, after a long march in the Missouri rain, when we'd just sit in the grass and not say a word to each other. Just stare at nothing. Us, 10 men on a dark tarmac, watching the medics move toward the wreck with their flashlights. The lights, they were bouncing off the jagged metal of the wing, like little stars in a muddy field. Back then, we didn't think much of it. We were just glad to have our feet on the ground. But now I think about the shared silence of that crew. No cheering, no backslapping, just the weight of being alive when others aren't. Chen. He was just a kid, 22 years old. He stood there with his hands deep in his pockets, staring at the number 3 engine, or where it used to be. You could see the white frost still on his oxygen mask, melting away in the Saipan heat. Life's messy like that. 1 minute you're 18,000 feet up, freezing and fighting for your life against the Tojos. And the next, you're standing in the grass, listening to the crickets. The Pacific. It was out there in the dark, big and indifferent. It didn't care about our 14 kills. It didn't care about the mathematics of fuel. It just let us go this time. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the dirt felt under my boots after 11 hours of vibrating metal floors. Or the taste of the first cup of coffee in the mess hall, even if it was bitter and stale. We were A-Square-52, a ghost ship that refused to die. And those 2 empty seats, well, they stay with you, long after the war ends and the bombers are turned into scrap metal. You see 'em when you close your eyes. Just 2 empty chairs in a room full of shadows. And the wind, it still whistles through that 6-foot hole in my memory. 10 men on the tarmac, just shadows in the dark.